And, excuse me, welcome back to Pokemon Team Creation Series. This one comes to us from Daniel F., who asks, what is the Pokemon team of Adam from Record of Ragnarok? I've done a couple of the Record of Ragnarok characters. I've done Jack the Ripper. I've done Zeus. So now we're on to Adam, the first human, and the one that is basically created in God's image. He went toe-to-toe with Zeus himself. Adam's a unique character, being the first human created along with Eve. Well, technically Eve came after Adam, but you know what I mean. He holds a very unique spot in like a series and as a character to create a team of Pokemon for. He also has enough going for him where making a team really wasn't that difficult. I just had to choose the right Mon to represent him. So being the first human means that he, in lore and in the show, he is created in the image of God. And so there is a Pokemon that is literally created in the image of God, and that is Silvally. Type Mons is Silvally. Now, it is a normal type as well in the space form, which really works well for a pure human character. Because if you watch, say, like, I believe it's Manji TV, I might be butchering the name of the channel, when he talked about the typings recently, he talked about how humans basically would be a normal type, nothing special about it. And so it makes sense that normal type would be kind of representative of the first human. Beyond that, though, it also is a good representation of being able to use his divine eyes. I can't remember exact divine reflection, I think it was called, where he's able to reflect the attacks of deities back onto them. And therefore, multi-type, it's a ability to basically be any type it wants, is a good way to kind of represent that, at least to a certain degree. Add on to the fact, though, that the next two Mon actually do represent his divine eyes. Because his divine eyes, like I said, are his main ability against gods, where he's literally able to throw a god's attack back, reflect it back on them. If it's a physical attack, too, he is literally able to, like when I think the serpent from Guardian Eden tried to get Eve in trouble, and he attacked Adam, his arm literally turned into a reptilian claw, and he just used the attack back on the snake. Now, for that, though, that means I wanted a Pokemon that can both reflect attacks back, so something that can learn Counter or Mirror Coat, or Mirror Coat, or like a Baneful Bunker or Spiky Shield, and a Pokemon that can copy attacks temporarily. So something like Smeargle wasn't going to work because Sketch literally allows Smeargle to copy any attack and actually make it its own. So I went with these guys, Eevee and our good old friend Wobbuffet. Now, Eevee, it's a lovely little cute little animal. It makes sense that a guy who named all the animals would have something animal-like on his team. But in Legends Arceus, it can naturally learn the move Mimic. So there's that. And I believe that carried over into Gen 9, I think. Regardless, Wobbuffet, though, I knew had to be a representation of this because it is the poster child for reflecting attacks back. Mirror Coat and Counter, respectively, are two of this Mon's trademark attacks. So, and he has a butt ton of HP, like a ass ton of it. So, yeah, no, this made 100% sense to use Wobbuffet on this team for that ability. But now we get into some of the less specific things. For example, his divine weapon, the Valkyrie that worked with him, was a knuckle duster. It was a brass knuckle, pretty much. So, what kind of Mon could we have that represents that? And unfortunately, there really isn't a good option there. I, though, went with Shieldon. Why, really? Because I could see someone holding this little Mon, using its shield-like head as a glove, as something to punch with. So, its flat shield head, I think, worked the best as something you would hold in your hand and then punch someone with. So, I went with that. Also, he is, as the first human, and, father to Eve, and then Cain, Abel, all that. He's a fatherly figure. One of the standout moments in the manga and the anime is when he's been blinded, his eyes have pretty much been shot, but he hears a child crying. And to him, all of humanity are his children. And a good father protects his children. And so, I looked it up too. A lot of people agree one of the most fatherly-like Pokemon is Drampa. I am a personal fan of Drampa. I do like it. It just seems like kind of like a Falcory, fun, friendly dragon. I do dig him. Now, I do wish he was a bit stronger, and maybe like it was like a 3-stage line. Honestly, you could make an argument that Drampa is not is like maybe only a middle stage. It could be. It does look like it could be a final stage too, but I could see it being just a middle stage. You had a smaller stage beyond this and something a bit more impressive beyond this. But I still like Drampa's design. It's a fun little Grandpa Dragon. Last but not least, though, there is the fighting style of Adam, and that is he's a boxer. Like, he doesn't really use leg kicks at all or anything like that. He's mostly just a brawler with his fists. So I knew for a fighting type it had to be a Pokemon that punches, and Hitmonchan fits the bill. It's the punching Pokemon, literally. So this is the bare bones team of Adam from Record from Ragnarok. Now, how balanced is this team? Well, actually pretty balanced. There's only really 3 types that are problematic for this, and only one of them that is majorly problematic. Flying is partly problematic due to the weaknesses that... did I say flying? I made a mistake, I think, with the flying. It's not flying that was a problem. It was fairy. I know fairy's a problem because Drampa and Hitmonchan are both weak to flying. So there's that. But other than that, and like seriously, other than fairy, the only other typing that is a legitimate problem for this team, but it is a big one, is fighting. 2/3 of this team gets wrecked by fighting types. Well, that's not entirely true. About 50% guaranteed are wrecked by fighting types. You got your Eevee, obviously, Shieldon, even if it was a Bastiodon. By the way, the reason I didn't choose Bastiodon is that that's more like a battering ram than something small. I went more with the small here. But yeah, and Drampa, obviously, being a normal type and Dragonite resisting fighting, is going to get hit by fighting pretty hard. Silvally, though, because of how we're going to treat how well this team would do in like the regions and the games, Silvally technically can counter the weakness to fighting because it can become any type. Now, this does make a big trade-off. Whatever type it is going to make a whole cavalcade of weaknesses show up. And the best way for me to figure out what type Silvally would be in each one is basically go with the idea of Adam's eyes. It's mirroring the attack back at the opponent. So whoever the gym leader is or the Elite Four member, whatever their type specialty is, that is the type that Silvally will have. With the exception of the champions, where I'm going to go with what their ace is. Because a lot of the champions have mixed type teams. Now, with that all said, and Silvally being the ace, and the fact that you can have a Silvally pretty much from the get, because it's a friendship-based evolution. How balanced is this team? Well, honestly, when it comes to Kanto, pretty fine. You're going to really cleave through the majority of these teams. Gym leaders pretty easy because Silvally's a fully evolved Pokemon with honestly solid stats. I believe Silvally's stat line, let's see here, Silvally, let's see. So yeah, Silvally's base stat total is like 500 something. Base stat, let's see here. Its base stat total is, if I can get it up here, like it's only like 100 stronger than type Null, as far as I remember. But yeah, its base stat total is 570. It's a pseudo legendary. It's close enough. It's a paradox Pokemon, and so its stats are pretty beast. But they're even all around. It's literally 95, 95, 95, 95, 95. So while it is a very good Pokemon in terms of its base stat total, it's also a catch-22 because it has no advantages in any stats. It's basically Arceus, but with a slightly lower stat total. That's basically it, because Arceus' stats are even across the board too. So that being said, you give it a rock typing, it's going to cleave through Brockstein. You give it a water typing along with having an Eevee now, it's going to cleave through Misty. It's going to cleave through... Really, there's no gym leader that's going to be problematic. All the gym leaders that have types that have advantages against your weaker Mon, like, say, Eevee or Shieldon, are going to be dumped on by Silvally, hit by your 3 big hitters, and then your ace, your wild card, Wobbuffet. When it ultimately came down to it, the only one you're really going to struggle with is Blue. And that really just comes down to which team he's using. When I was looking at it, I came to the conclusion that the best team you have a chance against is if he has Blastoise as a starter, because he still has the Rhyhorn and the Arcanine on the team with an Executor. The Executor is the only one that's going to be problematic. Flying doesn't have any strong specialties against water, and Alakazam will be trouble, but nothing too too hard to deal with. So, yeah, that's probably your best bet, because the other two have Gyarados on the team. And even though you still can maybe take down the Gyarados by giving him grass, the flying type makes grass a little bit more difficult to deal with. And then the Charizard's no good because you still have to deal with the Gyarados, and I believe that one has the Executor on there as well. So, yeah, even though you can deal with the Executor, you're not going to be able to deal with the Gyarados very well. So I would say that it's possible you can become champion in Kanto. But what about a region where you can actually become champion? Well, the actual answer to that is there's no guarantee in this version. Johto, really and truly, you'll cleave through the gyms, no problem. Faulkner is no problem. Or Faulkner, Bugsy, even Whitney and her Milk Tank, really not problematic at all. Gengar, because multi-attack changes the type whenever you are, giving Savali multi-attack on a ghost type gym is going to just cleave through that, as well as Dragon, because she doesn't have any dragons strong enough to take this guy on. Kingdra being her ace isn't going to matter, because Kingdra's stats, if I remember correctly, what is Kingdra's stats? Regardless, it doesn't really matter that much. Kingdra is her ace, but it's kind of irrelevant. Just because, again, stats, you still have much higher stats than Kingdra. That's what I'm trying to get at. Really, the only issue you're going to have is Lance. And while Savali is strong, absolutely, remember, I try to keep this within the levels of who you're fighting. So that means you still have to deal with 3 Dragonites. And while Savali will put up a good fight, it is not as strong as a Dragonite. Dragonite also has its stats more balanced out in different categories, whereas it's a complete, or balanced out isn't quite the right word. The stat dump in Dragonite is a lot more heavy in certain aspects than it is in Savali, who's basically 95 across the board. And if Savali falls in that fight, the only other thing you got really to back you up in this fight is Drampa. Savali's certainly going to take a couple of them down, but don't forget there's also an Aerodactyl, a Charizard, and a Gyarados on that team. And that's your first run. And we only talk about the first run. But it's possible you could still beat Lance, but it's arguably less likely than a Blue. With Blue, at least 1/3 of that team is almost guaranteed you could beat it. So, yeah. Then Hoenn, honestly, not Roxanne, but, Flannery. Flannery is probably your first hurdle. Because as you can see, remember, I go from top to bottom in order. That's the order you get these per gym. You shouldn't have any problem with Roxanne. You shouldn't have any problem with Chuck. Brawley. You shouldn't have any problem with Watson. But Flannery's where you're going to have a problem, because Shieldon, despite having resistance thanks to the rock type, for fire is still too weak to do anything, and Eevee will not last very long. Fire is kind of neutral with itself, so you're not really going to be able to do much with Savali. You are going to have a stat advantage, but that's about it. And Fire is the only one of the natural movesets that doesn't have a Fang attack that hurts it. There is no water, there is no rock, there is no ground Fang attack. I say that because Savali can naturally learn all the Fang moves, or at least the majority. You can learn Ice, Fire, Thunder Fang. I think you can even learn Poison Fang too. I know also nowadays there's Psychic Fang, and I think there's, and obviously Crunch and Bite count towards that too. But yeah, unfortunately there's no Fang attack, naturally speaking, that Savali can learn to hurt a Fire type. And Wobbuffet will be able to do a little bit, but eventually it probably will end up falling. So Flannery is going to be tricky, but not impossible. But then you run into just a wall once you get into Elite Four. All the other gyms are relatively doable. Not easy, but doable. Once you get to Drakeville, you're kind of SOL. Because he's got 2 Flygon with Earthquake, Salamence, if I remember correctly, Altaria, 2 Shelgons and Altaria, if I remember. And, I have it right here. Might be idiot. You can just look it up. And you literally got the site right here, so why didn't you look it up, dumbass? All right, 1 second. Drake. And I've always liked Drake. It makes sense that the steel type, which is resistant to dragon, would still win over him with Steven. But I do like Drake. I like the kind of pirate design he's got. And dragons are always cool. Nothing wrong with dragons. So, let's see here. And it's kind of impressive that, as a dragon type trainer, he actually ranks above the ice type trainer in Elite Four. Now, okay, if we're going by his Ruby and Sapphire team, which would be the strongest team to go over, he's got, like I said, 2 Flygon, but he also has a Kingdra and a Salamence and an Altaria. By the by, both of those damn Flygon have, one of those Flygon has Earthquake. There has goddamn Boom Burst on it. Plus Dragon Claw for one, Dragon Pulse for the other, Supersonic and Screech, Flamethrower. Like, these things are stacked. Hell, even that freaking Altaria has Moonblast. You can learn Fairy-type moves, which helps cover his Dragon weakness. And that's not even bringing up the damn Salamence, who, being a pseudo, means it's the only region with 2 pseudos. So, yeah, your almost pseudo isn't going to cut it here. So, yes, Savali will definitely put some work in. Probably take at least a couple of these guys out. But stat-wise, all these guys are not as strong as him, but definitely able to contend. And Salamence outright outranks it. So, unfortunately, Drampa can only do so much. So, unfortunately, I think you're walled at Drake. Even if you somehow manage to get past Drake in some miracle Hail Mary, the only thing you really got that can do anything against Steven is Hitmonchan, and he's got both Skarmory and a Claydol to deal with that. So, unfortunately, yeah, I don't think you can become champion. And Hoenn, Sinnoh, it's pretty, honestly, the gyms aren't very problematic. It's once you get to the Elite Four, Lucian is tough because this team has no good, real strong answers for psychic types. If you could get past Lucian, though, you're walled at Cynthia. Her team is far more versatile, has a Lucario on it in any version you look at with that damn Aura Sphere, which means you are in trouble. Even if you bring out Savali to match your ace, which you're only copying the main typing of Dragon, Garchomp is a pseudo, and that thing does have Earthquake on it, as well as having, I think, Dragon Pulse or Dragon Claw. Either way, you are in trouble. So, and then you also still have 2 unevolved Mon on this team. That's the other big problem with teams like this when trying to complete a run, is that you're limited by low base stat totals. Those 2 are going to go down quick, so you're in trouble after that. Unibud's the same way, but again, the real biggest issue here, actually, one problem is Roxy in Black and White too, because poison is kind of iffy against itself. You can't poison. But Savali being fully evolved still helps. Then you got to deal with Drayden, and Drayden has that damn Haxorus, and that thing is a beast. But once you get to Elite Four, you're done, because, as we've said, fighting types are a problem for the majority of this team. And one of the Elite Four members, Marshall, is insanely tough. He's going to cleave through the majority of your team. The only things you would have available at this point would be Savali and Wobbuffet. Now, Wobbuffet might be able to bring him down. I'm not joking. It might be able to bring him down. But the problem is, most of them have psychic coverage with, like, Sucker Punch, which means Wobbuffet, unless it uses counter, and a well-timed counter at that, which luckily you're fighting type, so you should be able to do that. Assuming it doesn't go down, it will be managed to take down 1 or 2 of them. But even then, you're still going to struggle. Even if you somehow manage that, Alder has bug types, which are just a weird one to go up a lot, like 3 different bug types. He's got an ice type, which you don't really have any strength against here. He's got another normal type, which again, except for Hitmonchan, no strength here. And Hitmonchan could maybe take care of the Vanilluxe. And then a Druddigon. And again, you get a bug steel type, which you have no strong answer for. It's just straight bug type with super speed, which is going to outspeed everything on this team. And Volcarona, which is a menace in its own right. And then Iris is half dragons with a Lapras, Aggron, and I believe it's Archeops. So yeah, you're not having a good time against the Unova teams. Kalos is a little bit of the same. Honestly, though, except for Valerie, most of the gym leaders are fine. Valerie's a fairy-type user, so that's and you don't have a strong answer on this team for fairies. Only 2 of them on are really weak, but you don't have a strong answer. That being said, you should be able to handle it. Most of the Elite Four is not really problematic, except for Drasna, the Dragon Elite Four member. She's a little problematic. But then dealing with Diantha, you're SOL at that point. Because Silvally, you're going to use to copy the base Psychic type for Gardevoir here. And, like, just Hawlucha alone is going to cleave through a giant chunk of your team. Like Eevee, Shieldon, you'll probably have to go through those guys quickly before you can go to anyone else. Then you'll try to throw out Wobbuffet. Wobbuffet might be able to take down Hawlucha with a well-placed counter. But the problem is Hawlucha's also flying, so the counter is actually not going to do a lot. And then it's going to be back and forth. Eventually, one's going to go down, probably Hawlucha. She's going to bring out Tyrantrum, wreck that thing's shop. You're going to try to bring out Drampa, do the best you can, but Tyrantrum just flat out outranks Drampa in terms of strength and typing. They both have a weakness to fighting, and Drampa luckily has an immunity to Ghost. But because of Rock, I believe resists Ice, so that's I believe it resists Ice. I know it's strong against Ice. Regardless, even if you manage to get through, you still got to get through then the Aurorus, the Gourgeist, the Goodra, and then a Mega Gardevoir, which nothing on this team is really good at handling. So Kalos is a no-go. Galar is also really no-go. You're going to struggle right at the 3rd gym with Kofu here, because you don't have good answers for fire types. And the 3-mon you would have aren't really going to be that good. Then you are going to seriously struggle with both Alistair and B. B specifically because of the fighting types, obviously. But then if you can get past that, you've also got to deal with Raihan, who with 2 Dragon, Ground, and Sandstorm tactics, you again have no good answers on this team for that. Like nothing except for Shieldon, and that's just going to get claved. And that's not even getting into Leon, who literally his ace is Charizard, but god damn it should have been Dragon Ball. Let's be honest. Because that thing, when you look at the moveset on that Dragon Ball, it has literally everything to handle you. It has a lightning attack, or electric attack, Thunderbolt, has Flamethrower, it has Dragon Breath, and I can't remember what the other one was. I think it was a Ghost type move. Point being, it literally has everything it needs to wipe out most teams on its own. And with an insane attack and speed stat, it will take out most of this team on its own. That leaves us with the last team for Paldea. And honestly, no joke, you can handle the majority of Paldea with this team. Savali will take down the bug gym leader, no problem. Savali also and Levo together should be able to take down the grass, no problem. And honestly, you shouldn't have much problem with the electric Iono. You shouldn't have that much problem either with her. By the time you get the shield on, you now are leveled up enough that you should be able to handle the water gym leader. Larry should be no problem because you have Drampa at that point. Then you'll have to deal with the ghost gym leader, which isn't too bad because you'll have Savali as a ghost type with multi-attack and solid stats. So that's really not a big deal, combined with either Wobbuffet for like just doing the cheesy counters or Dragapult Drampa, you should be fine. You will be problematic to deal with, Violet or whatever, the Psychic Gym Leader. It's the newest region, so I haven't really remembered the names properly yet, at least for most of them. Still, you shouldn't be in that big of a corner. And then Ice, you should actually have very little problem with. Yeah, Drampa's weak, but once again, counters a fighting type move. Granted, there's not a lot of physical moves they're going to use, but still. Plus, Mirror Coat's still going to do some damage. Hitmonchan alone can learn Fire Punch naturally, and Fire Fang for Savali, so that's not an issue. The issue comes with the Elite Four. The ground type gym leader, Rika is going to be trouble. You're going to struggle with Rika because one of your Mon is weak to ground. It's a Shieldon. But in theory, because of the ice type moves you can learn with Hitmonchan and Savali, you should be okay. Steel type, you can learn fire type moves, so you should be okay. Flying, you can learn electric type moves, so you should be okay. And dragon, you learn ice type moves, so you actually should be okay. The only issue is going to be Baxcalibur. That thing's problematic. So that one might be where you stop, but if you can get past that, it's an if, Gita's really not that difficult for this team. You can handle Veluza no problem. King Gambit, again, you can learn fire type moves, and you have fighting type moves as well in Hitmonchan. Avalon, again, fire and fighting moves. You honestly, even Glamora is really not that problematic. So, ironically, if you can get to Gita, you should be able to become champion. It's a really hassle is the biggest hurdle you're going to have, and that Excalibur is trouble. So, yeah, that's my thoughts. There's only a couple regions you can really become, truly a champion in, I think, and even then, it's not guaranteed. Even if the teams were fully evolved, like with Eevee being one of the evolutions and having a Bastiodon instead of the Shieldon, I still don't think it'd be a guarantee. You'd have a better shot, certainly. Let me put it this way: if at least Shieldon was evolved, I would say then yes, you can go on champion of Kanto, guaranteed. You'd probably be able to become champion of Johto. Mind you, the water type moves from Length would still be problematic, but you could still probably become that. I still don't think you'd become Hoenn champion. Still don't think you'd become Sinnoh's champion. I still don't think you'd become Univ's champion. It's a little bit more up in the air if you could become Kalos' champion. Galar, I still don't see it happening. And then I'd almost say it's guaranteed you can become champion if you had a fully evolved Bastiodon. So just having one of them fully evolved would be helpful. I digress, though. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see you for the next one.